paddle, and it's barely lukewarm after you've run as hard as you can for 100 meters. So the wind is significant in the convection heat loss of the insulation and as well as the pipe. So
another question. Okay. Oh, go ahead, you can finish.
So the key piece here is, if it goes to no flow, I don't know what your fail safe on your valves is, but fail safes on valves, if you lose electrical power, they're going to shut. So you're going to have isolated, you're going to be at no flow condition, and that's where the weather's going to take it. Because if you have no flow, you have no source of reheating your working fluid. When your working fluid goes down in temperature, you're going to be in the liquid phase or the gas phase. Eventually, you're going to be in the gas phase if you lose energy for so long that your pumps are not pumping and your valves are not open. There's where the problem's going to be.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Haugen-Hoffert. Good morning.
Good morning.
In your testimony, you started to talk, but you were cut off. So I believe I heard you say that you made some calls to Bismarck regarding your analysis. Was that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me who you called?
I can.
And summarize them for me, please. Who you called and just a summary of those telephone conversations.
Called Brian Bittner, and also the lawyer you have there, Mr. Backey. And I asked some questions about what the layout of Bismarck is. Because knowing what carbon dioxide is and what its physical properties are, regardless of the 5 different phases it can be in, is essential to any kind of analysis of what would happen if it gets out of the pipe.
So when you talk about layout, can you be a little bit more specific there as far as what was provided?
Yes, I got the map that's got the 51.46 miles of anticipated pipeline for Burleigh County, North Dakota. And then I asked questions about, okay, how is Bismarck elevation-wise related to where the proposed pipeline is? And the answers I had was the Bismarck butts up against the Missouri River, and the southern portion of it, which is south of Main Street, is on the floodplain. So the floodplain is where the majority of it will reside unless the wind is straight out of the west and the fault is on the eastern side of Bismarck below that. I gotta pull up a magnifying glass here again. Interstate 94. If it's calm when it actually fractures, because the energy inside the supercritical fluid carbon dioxide, it's a lot of energy, because if you just think of gases having to be compressed, you're putting all that work energy from the pump on the fluid, all that energy ends up in the fluid. That's another portion of the Joule-Thomson effect of pressurizing fluids. So it is going to continue to flow out if the isolation valves, because here's the other part of supercritical fluid that I understand, is that in petroleum, if you use carbon steel, the oil is going to coat the carbon steel and preserve it against corrosion. Carbon dioxide is a supercritical fluid. If there's one molecule of water, it's going to be acidic. If it's pure, it's going to be caustic. It is not providing any protection to the pipe that it's going through. So one of my first questions was, okay, what are they coating the insides of these things with? So if it's pure...
Were you given an answer to that?
I couldn't get an answer from that because it wasn't released. It wasn't released to one of them.
Okay.
So I was thinking it's going to be coated with Teflon or something to keep the pipe from corroding from inside. The other problem is going to be in the valves. The valve surfaces themselves, and we have some dimensions of that, but it's getting into the weeds.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Dawson, any questions?
I'm trying to understand what you said earlier. Did you say that carbon steel gets brittle at a temperature commonly reached in the state of North Dakota?
In the wintertime, yes.
Okay. And so that'd be carbon steel in pipelines or on bridges or in cars or anywhere?
Yes.
Okay. And did you say that when there is the pipe is ruptured in any sort of manner, it would be a guillotine break because of the freezing action or the fracturing action?
Not necessarily. It depends on how much of the pipe has been embrittled before the first leak occurred. So when the leak occurs, you're going to be expanding the fluid, whether it's liquid, high density liquid, or whether it's a supercritical carbon dioxide. It's going to be expanding and releasing at 1 atmosphere, 14.7 psi. That system itself is going to cause supercooling of the pipe. So whether it happens at 100 degrees or whether it happens at a negative 40 degrees, it's going to get a lot cooler very fast. Just like your CO2 fire extinguisher, release that thing from pressure, just pressurized gas, CO2 inside of it to the outside at 1 atmosphere. It's going to deposit frost on the cone. And then it conducts electricity. That's why it's a problem for people by electrical fires.
Thank you.
Mr. Bakke, any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor, in relation to this issue of pipeline regulations, you were asked about that, and the entity that governs pipelines in the U.S. is called PHMSA, PHMSA. However, they are in the process of formulating specific pipeline standards on CO2 because the current pipeline standards deal with all materials in pipeline, natural gas, oil, etc. Is what needs to be considered here is information and standards specific to CO2, because as you pointed out, for other things such as natural gas or oil, there's different considerations from a chemistry standpoint and a physics standpoint.
I'm going to object. Mr. Bakke is about a minute into a question. It's pure testimony, and this witness has testified he's not familiar with the federal regulations, and if he's going to be asked to be opined about potential changes to federal regulations, he does not have foundation for that opinion.
I can phrase it a different way.
Please do.
So is it important to know what's going to be inside the pipeline in determining what standards should be adhered to?
Absolutely. No doubt.
Okay. And then you talked about carbon steel getting brittle, and you said for some products inside the pipeline, there is either Teflon insulation or there is actually some insulative material that occurs due to the product inside the pipeline. Is that correct?
That is close. I was expecting Teflon to be there because of the caustic nature without water and the acidic nature with water as an impurity inside the supercritical carbon dioxide. So that matters. The natural gas is just compressed gas. It doesn't have as far as I know, it doesn't have any caustic nature or any acidic nature because it's just methane. It's compressed methane. And so the petroleum by nature is nonpolar. It's not going to be invasive to a metal and cause it to corrode.
And is that part of what makes carbon dioxide in a supercritical phase so dangerous in a pipeline? Is it has chemical constituents and makeup that's different than many products that go in pipelines such as natural gas and oil?
The carbon dioxide is a very unique gas when it's in the supercritical fluid stage. It's most of the research that I've been able to read through and understand was that they are using it in systems like the Rankine cycle for air conditioning. You're using it as a working fluid. It's not coming in from one side open. It's not an open source kind of piece. You're not open from one side and putting it to some other side. It's inside of a closed loop and the pipes are tiny. So when you put high pressure, this goes right back to main condensers in submarines. Your most critical weld is in the main condenser. Why? Because we're going to have submergence pressure of the seawater, and that seawater is 35,000 parts per million of chlorine, regardless of everything else that's in it. That's going to cause your chlorine pitting of it. So those are the critical pieces, and they have to be heat treated to make sure they're not going to leak. We have tails inside of the main condenser to see if we're getting seawater, but the last thing is having salinity alarms when seawater starts going into our feed water, which we're going to put into our steam generators, which has the primary fluent on the other side of those U-tubes. So that is the critical piece. We have to have the seawater on the inside of it because we need the steam to condense on the outside. The steam condensing on the outside keeps all that metal from being cold, because we go into the Arctic waters as well, just like the Nautilus did before, back in 1958. So we have to be able to withstand the temperature changes. That's why we don't use carbon steel. We use Inconel in that. It's because it's resistant to chloride pitting, as well as it doesn't have a phase transformation that turns into a brittle substance. While you have your fluids moving and your fluid temperatures on the inside are good, that's why you haven't seen many failures yet if they've been using supercritical fluid that's above 88 degrees. Because even with
let me stop you there and just a couple of final questions. Is the time of year that Bismarck and Burleigh County would be at greatest risk is during the winter months in extreme cold situations? Okay. And in terms of the wind speed, the wind direction, all variables that can change day to day, temperature, humidity, is that part of the danger? Is you just don't know when you might have a failure or a rupture or a loss of power to this CO2 pipeline? Is you want to plan for the worst and hope for the best?
Well, you have to plan for the worst, because the emergency action on this thing is just going to be so short. It's colorless, it's scentless. You can't even taste it until it's 30%, and that's too late. 4% is going to cause you to pass out within 4 minutes. And so that's what I based what volume of pipe you would need to be able to fill the whole valley there with carbon dioxide bigger than 4%. So
okay, thank you.
There's nothing you can't. The warning will be way too short.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steinbrun. I don't have anything further.
Mr. Malberg, any other questions?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Pella?
No questions.
Mr. Jordy?
No questions.
Any other commissioner questions, or Mr. Dawson? All right, that's all the questions we have for you, Mr. Steinbrunn. Thank you for testifying this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Mr. Jordy, I think the next witness was yours, and it's about 11:45. I think you indicated before that you anticipate this to be a short testimony.
Well, I've been wrong.
I know you can't control the other parties, but.
Well, no, it's all good. Can I ask Your Honor a question? Are you intending to break it at 12:30 today, or just in 15 minutes? Because that would affect what we do if we.
Well, I think we can go. We don't have a hard break at noon, so I think we can go a little over today if we need to. So I think we want to be in the neighborhood of the 12:30, but I don't think there's any hard deadlines today.
That helps very much. So in that case, I will call Dr. John Abraham, who appears virtually, Your Honor.
Mr. Abraham, can you hear me? Or Dr. Abraham?
Yeah, I can. I'm trying to get my camera to work, and it looks like it's having trouble with the camera, so I can try to fix that. Can I testify if my camera's not working?
Yes, I think it's okay as long as we can hear you.
You
Yeah,
can.
okay.
I prefer to see you, but on the GoToMeeting, doctor, next to the mic, do you see that camera button? There we go.
Got
There
it.
you are.
Okay. All right. Okay. Now we got you.
Dr. Abraham, I'll have you start by stating your full name for the record, spelling your last name.
Sure. My name is John, John, Patrick, Patrick, Abraham, just like Lincoln, Abraham.
And Dr. Abraham, before you testify today, I'm required by law to advise you on the penalties for perjury in the state of North Dakota. Perjury is a Class C felony, punishable by a maximum fine of $10,000, a maximum 5 years imprisonment, or both. Do you understand what perjury is?
I do.
And being advised of the potential penalties for perjury, do you promise to tell the truth in this case today?
I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jordy.
Yes, thank you. Doctor, we've marked as exhibit, landowner exhibit 43, a copy of your resume. And I would like to ask you a few questions, and basically if you can kind of essentially give the commission a little flavor for your education experience background, specifically in mechanical engineering, and most poignantly for today in dispersion and modeling and computational fluid dynamics. So with that, I'll just kind of let you highlight the key points to give the commission a flavor of your expertise.
Yeah, sure. And I can start talking, Mr. Jordy, even before you get the exhibit up, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. I would ask that I think the commission might have it in front of them. And frankly, let me just offer it. I don't think there's going to be objections, and then everyone will be able to look at it. I would offer landowners 43.
Is there any objection to landowner 43?
43?
Yep, 43.
And 43 is just the CV, not any testimony, correct, Mr. Jordy?
That's correct.
No objection.
Mr. Pelham?
No objection.
All right, 43 is received.
Okay, so please summarize the salient points.
Sure, and I'll be brief. So I have 3 degrees in the field of mechanical engineering with a special emphasis on an area called thermal sciences, which deals with flow. And it's the flow of heat, and it's also the flow of fluids and mass. And by the way, fluids can be liquids like water, or they can be gases like air. Both of those refer to fluids. So that's my primary specialty. I do work in other disciplines of engineering, but that's the relevant experience that I bring to the table for this case. I have performed about 400 or 450, or produced 400 or so pieces of research. Most of those are peer-reviewed in the scientific literature. And many of those deal with a topic called CFD, which is short for computational fluid dynamics. And that is using computers to predict where fluids will travel. And in addition, my scientific research heavily focuses on heat transfer, how things get heated up and what happens when they get heated up. In addition to that, I have written textbook chapters or textbook material on how to perform fluid flow analysis. And I've also published a peer-reviewed study on carbon dioxide plumes that emerge after a rupture, a pipeline rupture, and where they go. So that's a brief summary of my, and lastly, I've got a lot of experience with what's called overland flooding, about 40 different journal papers on the topic of water management, and many of those include flooding.
And then do you edit, or have you edited or been a part of any type of publications that publish scientific articles or research in any of these fields?
Yes, I'm the editor-in-chief of two of the top journals in numerical heat transfer that deals with this topic called CFD. I'm also the primary editor on the top-ranked book series in heat transfer, which also deals with fluid flow. And I'm also the editor on another series published by CRC Press on the same topic. So I'm editor of 4 different publications.
And sir, approximately how many times in, be it agency or courtroom proceedings, have you testified as an expert in your various fields of expertise?
I've testified in trials or hearings such as this on the low 20s, maybe 22 or 23 times. And I've sat for depositions approximately 50 times.
Now, getting to the North Dakota specific matter before us here, and to speed this along a bit, is it true, or does it fit with your recollection that over a year ago I had contacted you to see if you would be interested in providing technical expertise in this particular matter?
Yeah, that's what I remember. In the first maybe quarter of last year, that's my recollection. We had our first contact related to this case.
And then at some point, you probably don't necessarily remember, but at some point this matter was decided. At least initially, the PSC made a ruling denying the application, and I never ended up utilizing you last year. Is that kind of a fair summary?
Yeah, that's correct.
But over a year ago, when I initially contacted you, is it true that I asked if you would be willing and able to review and vet Summit's or their consultants' data related to any of their dispersion modeling or risk analysis?
Yes, that's what I understood part of my primary tasks to be.
And then without stating the obvious, I guess in order to review Summit's, what they claim or present as the dispersion, the plume analysis, the risks, their methodology, inputs, outputs, would you need all of those things in order to vet their ultimate conclusions?
Well, yeah, I mean, to state the obvious, that's true. I need to see their work in order to evaluate their work. And I haven't been provided any of their materials, and it's my understanding that hasn't been made available. So what you've stated is correct.
And do you recall that last year there were some attempts to get that material, but then ultimately the commission had denied the application, and then again this year there's been renewed attempts, but we don't have those Summit documents. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding.
All right. And so it's impossible then for you to perform the task on behalf of the landowner clients of reviewing and vetting and testing the inputs and the values that Summit may or may not have used in whatever risk analysis they did, unless you are furnished all of that documentation and the methodology behind it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's correct. I mean, I can't review what I don't have access to. And that's a short way of putting it. You were a little more eloquent, but yes, that is correct.
All right. So until such time that that's provided, you wouldn't be able to perform the function for which I asked you for assistance in this case, correct?
Correct.
All right. I don't have any further questions of this witness, sir. I'll turn you over to Cross if there are any on the limited topics we discussed in direct.
Mr. Dublinski, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Pelham?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Bakke?
No questions, but go Tommies.
Commissioner
Yes, go
Chrisman?
Tommies. Thank you for that.
None, Your Honor. Thank you.
Commissioner Haugen-Hoffert?
No, I do not.
Mr. Dawson?
No questions.
All right. Well, you got the least amount of questions in our hearing so far, Dr. Abraham. So
Anticlimactic. I expected a grilling. Thanks, everyone. And if you need me to come back, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Doc.
Thanks for appearing this morning. All right. I think we will take our lunch break next, but I just want to confirm, I think Mr. Jordy, you have all the witnesses this afternoon. So could you confirm who you're calling this afternoon?
So yes, and maybe to everyone's joy, I'm not sure, but based on how everything's gone, and let me just preface, you know, I'm familiar with not getting my way, and so no hard feelings there. But based on how the rulings and things have gone, I'm only going to have one more witness, and that would be Mr. Howard, who's waiting on the line. I think I could have him on and off in 15 minutes, and that's my last witness.
For today or for the hearing?
For today, I'll have.
For today.
Yeah, no, but I want to be clear, so this is not a trick. On June 3rd, I'm planning on having one witness. So I'm saying I'm cutting, you know, the rest of my experts loose is what I'm telling you.
And what you're asking is to take Mr. Howard's testimony now.
I think his entire testimony is going to take less than 25 minutes, and then we're done unless Mr. Dublinsky has anyone that can be in rebuttal on either remote or in person. But then I'm done for today.
Mr. Bakke, you don't have anybody else available for today?
I do not. My one witness, as I said, had a medical issue, so she can't be here.
Okay. Mr. Dublinsky, I don't know if you were aware of possible hearing time this afternoon, but.
Mr. Jordy and I talked about that last night, but you know, I did not know who all he was going to pass on or not. And so we were still waiting to see what happened today to determine rebuttal. We do not have witnesses lined up. We can certainly move them to Monday morning instead of Monday afternoon to accommodate the change in space. If Mr. Bakke's concluded and Mr. Jordy only has one, we can have everybody ready earlier in the day, but unfortunately we can't have folks ready yet this afternoon. So,
any objection to taking Mr. Howard's testimony and then recessing for the rest of the day?
Your Honor, I'm only speaking for myself. I don't object to doing that. I do have this question. I think I understood Mr. Jordy to say that when we finish with this witness, he will just have one on Monday. Which one is that?
Yes, that. So it's John Hagerot, an affected landowner who unfortunately couldn't make it. I tried him the first 3 days of this week. So that's an affected landowner. I don't know if Mr. Rockstad, another affected landowner, would testify. He would be remote. He's out of state. But to be very clear, I am not going to be calling any of my non-landowner witnesses, and those are the only 2 landowner witnesses that would potentially testify on June 3rd.
Okay. They're 2 okay with proceeding? Yes, okay. Yes, and so I'm not sure, is it Mr. Howard or Dr. Howard?
Mr. Howard, yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Howard, can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
I will have you start by stating your full name and spelling your last name for the record.
Full name is Jason Richard Howard, Howard.
And Mr. Howard, I know you were on and off this morning. Did you hear me go through the penalties for perjury already today?
Yes.
And do you understand what perjury is?
I do.
And being advised of the potential penalties for perjury, do you promise to tell the truth in this case today?
I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jordy.
And I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. I want to circle back to Commissioner Crispin's question. I did have one more witness, and that I forgot he's not on my list. That's Victor Shook. I've been communicating with Mr. Pelham. It's simply basically procedural questions, and he would take about 3 minutes. So I could call him today, on the 3rd or on the 4th. It doesn't matter, but I just want to be clear that I forgot to mention Mr. Shook. But with with that, Mr. Howard, thank you for waiting so patiently. You've prepared pre-filed or direct testimony in this matter. I'll tell you it's been marked in these proceedings as Exhibit 47. That's not relevant to you, but do you recall providing pre-filed testimony of a couple pages and then attached to it some, your resume and then various maps that you've prepared?
Can you hang on, Mr. Jordy? Do we have hard copies of those?
Oh, sorry, Roseanne. I thought Roseanne had passed those out. I apologize.
They're coming around just now, so.
Okay. So while those are circulating, maybe I can just ask you a little bit to summarize your resume and your expertise in the GIS mapping field.
Sure. I have 25 years, I think it's 25 years of professional expertise in the GIS field. I'm currently working for Maricopa Association of Governments in Phoenix, Arizona, where I have been the GIS program manager for, I think, about 16 years now. I've been at the agency about 17 total. Got my undergraduate degree in geography from University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, and a master's in geography at Arizona State University.
And by looking at your resume, sir, without going through every page, it's almost everything you have listed there in your professional career has to do with GIS mapping or your geography or cartography. And so for the benefit of the commission, just what does GIS stand for?
Geographic Information Systems.
And today, sir, so much can be done if you have access to various software systems and data, and just kind of summarize generally what your methods were and what you did here to produce the attachments to Exhibit 47.
Okay, well, there's the attachments that go county by county and depict the pipeline route as provided by Summit, as well as a 1 mile buffer. That 1 mile buffer was based on emergency response information from Satartia, Mississippi. And this actually originated from work I've been doing in Iowa. And that we and basically I would call them my steering committee of individuals, volunteers in Iowa, came up with this 1 mile buffer because it did track with what happened in Satartia. And for everyone's edification, Satartia was about a mile from the pipeline rupture, so we chose that as a good buffer for that pipeline.
Let me just stop you there for a second, because I'm going to offer the exhibit in a moment, and I'm going to get into those attachments in a little bit more detail. But in terms of the process, like the ingredients that went into this, if we could, you started with Summit's publicly available maps, I think, as maybe, was it January 2024, or what were available on the North Dakota PSC website, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then you take their maps, their data, and accept that as true, and then you looked for, in your first set, was it residences within various distances?
Yes, I've been referring to them as dwelling units throughout this whole process.
Okay.
Again, back to Iowa, for what we're dealing with here in North Dakota, they're just going to be single family residences. We're not getting in. I don't think I identified any apartments or any other type of dwelling unit. So basically, dwelling units is single family residences. That's where that 1 mile buffer really comes in, is that's kind of the defining boundary. I wanted to identify houses within a mile either side of the pipeline. And that was done visually. So once I had located the pipeline, got my 1 mile buffer, I went through using aerial imagery that's publicly available through ESRI, and identified what I could identify from that as dwelling units. I tried to use some Google Street View where I could if there was any question, but that's kind of hit and miss with the coverage there. So that's how I identified those dwelling units.
Okay, and then again, at this point, I'm just laying some kind of quick foundation for each set of the attachments. So then moving to what you refer to as attachment 3, that's the landslide area, and then kind of the ingredients there. What was the you accepted as true Summit's route based on their PSC filed data, and then it looks like, did you overlay that on something?
Yes, that I paired with publicly available landslide data from North Dakota Geological Survey. And these are existing landslides that the Geological Survey has identified.
All right. And then it looks like lastly, which would be, I believe, attachment 4, is it's 2 color aerials, or is that part of the other attachment? It looks like you go into detail on the landslides. Okay.
Yeah, that's the color. That's just detail of where there's an intersection between known landslides and the pipeline route.
Okay. With that, I would offer Exhibit 47.
Any objection to 47?
No objection.
Mr. Pelham?
No objection.
47 is received.
And so again, the commission has that, and I don't need to get into every nitty-gritty detail, but I just want to, for the record, make sure to touch on a couple things. So in the first several pages, you're looking at dwelling units, and you've defined how you went about that and what it excludes. And then you selected distances of 400 feet or less, and then 401 foot up to 1,855, and then greater than 1,855, but yet still within the 1 mile buffer. Is that fair?
Correct.
And sir, approximately how many dwelling units based on your definition, so not apartments or things other than what's, I think, single family residences, did you come up with in that 401 to 1,855 distance?
163 dwelling units.
All right. And again, you didn't do like hospitals or daycare centers or other sensitive things. You were focused simply on dwelling units, correct?
That's correct. The hospitals, daycares, nursing homes, those would be group quarters, and I would have difficulty. It would be more difficult for me to identify their capacity anyway.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And then if I toggle down to the landslide data, it looks like you've got, and I'm looking at on page 19 of the exhibit, you've got the showing kind of the eastern portion of North Dakota and Cass, Richland, Sargent, Dickey counties. And then you get over to the area by Bismarck on page 20. And tell me why you highlighted and included the last 2 pages of the color aerial versions.
Those are the areas where the Summit's pipeline route crosses known landslide areas. Okay. All right. So to be clear, this Geological Survey has identified existing landslides. It's already moved, but that doesn't exclude the potential for future movement.
All right. And to be clear and fair to you, you're not here to opine on the relative risks of being in that area. This is for demonstrative and educational purposes for the commission and their consideration based on your GIS expertise, correct?
That is correct.
All right, sir. I thank you with that. Again, it's very detailed, and I'm going to leave it there and see if there's any cross-examination questions for you. Thank you.
Mr. Dublinski, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Pelham?
Sir, I'm just wondering, Did you do any other potential route analysis in comparison to the population numbers that were determined in your 1 mile buffer for the proposed line?
I did not. I took Summit's route as written.
Do you know whether or not a potential route would exist in the state of North Dakota that would avoid all human population?
I do not, but just judging by what I can see of North Dakota's landscape, it's fairly sparsely populated.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any other questions for you.
Mr. Bakke, any questions?
Yes, just briefly, could you turn to page 9 of Exhibit 47 where you have the map of Burleigh County?
Burleigh, got it.
Okay, and did you happen to count up how many dwelling units there were within which are the yellow ones from 401 feet to 1,855 feet?
I haven't, but I can, if you can humor me for a minute.
Sure, and then I'm going to have the same question regarding the greater than 1,855 feet, but still within 1 mile.
So Burleigh. Yeah, you were looking for the 401.
401 to 1855 first.
So we should have in the 401 to 1855 range, we should have 58 units.
Okay, and then from the 1855 feet to 1 mile, how many have you identified in Burleigh County?
We should have 170
dwelling units. Okay. And how is dwelling units defined?
Basically, for this, it would be a single family home or a multifamily residence, but I did not identify any apartment dwellings in Burleigh County.
Okay, so when your definition of dwelling units would be occupied structures by humans.
Occupiable. I can't speak to whether they are occupied or not. Likewise, I can't really identify whether a home is abandoned or not from aerials. I can generally get a pretty good idea whether a house is abandoned, just kind of based on what kind of activity looks like is taking place around it, and I did try to exclude those.
So you didn't identify any abandoned dwelling units in Burleigh County within the 1 mile buffer?
I would have been trying not to include those.
Okay. And then how about within the 400 feet or less? Were there any identified? There's a lot of dots here, so it's kind of hard to.
Yeah,
see.
there was one, I think. Let me just verify that. Yeah, no, not within 400. The one within 400 there was actually one within 400, and that was Sargent County.
Okay, and then in looking at all of the maps of North Dakota identifying the dwelling units, including Burleigh County through all the other ones in Exhibit 47 that continues on after that, it looked to me like the county by far that had the greatest number of dwelling units within 1 mile of the proposed location of the Summit pipeline route is Burleigh County. Is that accurate?
That would be my guess.
I mean, rather dramatic difference between Burleigh County and the other counties in terms of the number of dwelling units within 1 mile.
Correct.
Okay. That's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I might add that rather than including the count of the individual dwelling units at the bottom of the map in the legend, I included an estimated impact population, and that would more or less track with the number of dwelling units, since your persons per household across these counties is fairly consistent.
Okay. And for Burleigh County, that the estimated impacted population was 992.
Correct.
Which in comparison to the other counties is substantially more.
Yes, it is substantially more.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Chrisman?
Are you familiar with North Dakota code and what our setback requirement is from occupied structures?
I believe it was 500 feet.
And then did you say why you chose to base this on 400 rather than 500?
Carried that over from our work my work in Iowa, where, and I'll just tell you where that originated from. It was the 400 foot was a number that Iowa Farm Bureau came up with as recommending keeping structures away from. And so the 400 feet was a bit more conservative, and we just carried that over to North Dakota. And we, within that, if you're looking at the 500 foot threshold, at that point, you're only talking about two, is it two? Yeah, it's I think 2 dwelling units across the entire pipeline in North Dakota.
Does Iowa, like from a legislature or some official elected body, have a setback requirement? I'm curious why you choose to use farm bureaus.
That's what was available. To my knowledge, there's not a statewide standard. I believe individual counties are attempting to adopt something, but all we really have to go on is Iowa Farm Bureau's recommendation.
So the state of Iowa doesn't have a setback requirement?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then regarding the landslide areas, so it's just the 2 of them and they're pretty close together, one in Cass and one in Richland counties, right?
Yes.
And where did you get that information from?
That's available online from the North Dakota Geological Survey.
Are you aware that these applications are sent to the North Dakota Geological Survey and they provide comments to us on things that should be avoided or things that should be used with certain limitations or things like that?
Well, I am now.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
Commissioner Haugen-Hoffert?
Thank you for your testimony. I have no questions.
Mr. Dawson, any questions?
Why did you choose 1,855 feet?
1,855 feet is based on publicly available data from Navigator's modeling for South Dakota and Illinois. And so that was the distance a CO2 plume could travel with a concentration of 40,000 parts per million, and from an 8-inch pipeline. We don't have anything else from Summit, so the Navigator data is all we have to go on at this point.
No further questions.
Any redirect, Mr. Jordy?
No, thank you, Mr. Howard. I don't have any questions. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Howard, for testifying for us today.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Any other matters we need to address before we conclude, Mr. Pelham?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to address Mr. Jordy's comment about calling Victor Shook to the stand. I've communicated with Mr. Leibel as to what I understand the general nature of the questions that Mr. Shook is going to be asked. I provided some information to Mr. Jordy last night. I don't know if that's satisfactory or not. I would note that Mr. Shook was not listed as a witness. He was subsequently listed as a witness on one of the forms, but I would like to get this matter resolved now rather than later.
And I'm happy to call him right now. Like I said, it'd just take a few minutes. I will list him for June 4th if we don't get it done. I don't want to be difficult about this, and it's not going to be any gotcha questions for him. I just need to complete the record on this matter.
When you meet Mr. Pelham, when you mean get it done, you mean call Mr. Shook?
I think we do it now.
Okay. Mr. Shook, do you want to take the witness stand? I'll have you start by stating your full name for the record and spelling your last name.
Your Honor, if we may, it is obviously a bit, there are some issues with calling staff counsel. My understanding from the conversation that Mr. Pelham had with Mr. Leibel was that this was an issue that could be resolved by stipulation rather than by calling the witness. On the basis of that representation, we agreed to provide certain information, which I understand Mr. Pelham provided last night, that we thought was for the purpose of resolving this issue by stipulation rather than calling the witness. And I am not aware of what changed since that representation was made, but we certainly kept our end of the deal to allow the information to be provided to Mr. Jordy.
Just to respond, Mr. Jordy hasn't communicated with me. I mean, ordinarily I would pick up the phone and call someone, but that didn't happen. So I communicated that information to him. I had a communication not with Mr. Jordy, but with his colleague, Mr. Leibel, who's not unable to be here today. But I provided the information, but apparently it's not satisfactory given Mr. Jordy's representations earlier this morning to still seek to call Mr. Shook. So I don't know what the issue is.
Mr. Jordy, can you enlighten us?
Well, sure. Is there a restriction on calling Mr. Shook as a witness? If not, we're frankly kind of wasting our time with all of this. I'm going to be done with him in 3 minutes or less. So if there's not a restriction, can we just proceed respectfully, please?
I personally have never looked into that issue. I mean, Mr. Shook has obviously questioned witnesses in this proceeding so far, and it's probably going to be assisting in the decision-making process. So I think is an unusual request, and I don't know the substance of the information that was requested or provided. All I know is there's been discussions that have been had between the parties outside of our hearing regarding calling Mr. Shook as a witness. So I think if there was a way to put this information into the record without calling him as a witness, that would be better. Because do have concerns about opening a potential can of worms there.
Well, I'm not going to ask him any opinions. This is just facts. I just need to get some facts into the record through him. So, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I just, unless there's a legal prohibition on calling him as a witness, I don't see how this is any different than anyone else that's testified.
And Your Honor, if I could, just for the record, you said there were communications between the parties. I'm not in the loop on this at all. I checked my emails just now, and I don't see an email from Mr. Pelham, but sometimes on my phone they stack. So I don't know if that was sent to me as well.
No, it wasn't. I didn't send you anything.
Yeah, so I don't even know what the issue is. So I'm just so you know, I wasn't one of the parties involved in any of these communications, but I guess probably I should be.
Well, yes, I've noted my thoughts on potential concerns. I haven't looked into this issue, so I guess I can't say for certain whether or not it is or isn't an issue. Mr. Pelham, I assume, since you're maybe reluctantly saying.
Well, look, my preference is to provide the information that Mr. Jordy is requesting. I've provided him the information that I understand he's requested, but he's still insisting on calling Mr. Shook. There is past precedence rather for commission staff being called as witnesses at hearings. So I don't think that there's any legal preclusion from it. But again, we're spending however much time we spent talking about this was already attempted to be resolved prior to spending the time on it. But my preference is to work with Mr. Jordy on that. But from what I understand, and him still insisting on calling Mr. Shook, that would not result in any ability to do that. So rather than doing that, my preference would be is to just get it done now.
Your Honor, my only concern, and obviously, there have been a lot of things that we certainly believe, rightly or wrongly, are undertaken for delay. What we don't want is a situation where Mr. Shook is up here for a couple of procedural questions, and then there's later an argument, not necessarily by Mr. Jordy, but by anybody, that in that case, Mr. Shook should not be able to advise the commission, for example, and whether or not that hinders the commission's processes. Again, I haven't fully researched it. I know that is an issue in some states. That's the sort of thing I'm trying to avoid. And if we can just stipulate to the information that Mr. Jordy wants, it solves all those problems. It prevents all of those potentialities down the road. And I thought we had that worked out. And, I guess my bad for us cooperating.
Mr. Jordy, is there any reason why you can't stipulate?
Well, I wouldn't. Well, I guess my answer to that would be there's no reason why I called any witness. I mean, sure, there's multiple ways to do anything. There's no prohibition on what I'm requesting. I respectfully request to just get on with this, please.
But, well, before that, Judge, I would just like a stipulation, at least from Mr. Jordy, that he's not going to later object to Mr. Shook's further involvement in the case because of the fact that he was called as a witness.
Absolutely not. Meaning I will stipulate to that. I don't want Mr. Shook off the case. He clearly knows what he's doing. So no, that is not the intent. Absolutely.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Jordy. That was Mr. Dublinsky's comment. I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't an issue. So I don't have an objection to doing it and having Mr. Shook examined on the limited procedural basis that's been represented. And if there's a question that's objectionable, then I'll object.
Absolutely.
Right. Does that satisfy your concern, Mr. Jablonski?
It really is Mr. Pelham's issue. If Mr. Pelham's comfortable, we don't object.
Okay. All right. Mr. Shook, do you want to state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Victor Shook, SCHOCK.
And I know you've heard me go through the penalties for perjury numerous times the
Many,
last
many
couple
times.
days. Yep. And do you understand what perjury is?
I do.
And being advised of the potential penalties for perjury, do you promise to tell the truth in this case today?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jordy.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Shook, for bearing with us and for what may seem like stating the obvious. Sir, you are the director of the Public Utilities Division of the North Dakota Public Service Commission, correct?
Correct.
And you have responsibilities related to the Summit carbon pipeline docket that brings us here today, is that correct?
Correct.
And as part of those responsibilities, without telling me any details, is it true that you or the persons working with you at the Public Service Commission receive documents from all sorts of sources, from Summit, from third parties, from state agencies, from other people concerned in this docket?
Correct.
And do you see yourself as the PSC as both a party to the proceedings and an advisor to the commission?
I object. I think that calls for a legal conclusion.
I agree.
Okay, and that's
Objections.
fine. That's fine. I mean, I guess I can figure out what that answer is. And sir, in this particular case, it's been proven that Summit did provide certain dispersion modeling or certain type of documents or data or information related to dispersion modeling or methodologies and pipeline risk assessment to the PSC. Is that limited fact true?
Yes.
And for that type of data that was provided by Summit to the PSC, are you aware that that data has not been provided to the other parties in this matter pursuant to a protective order?
I'm not sure what parties Summit may or may not have provided it to. I know the commission has not provided it to any of the parties.
Okay, that's fair. And are you able, without telling me any of the content, any of the findings, any of the inputs, any of the relevant underlying data, are you in a position to tell me, for instance, like the title or the name of the documents that the PSC received relative to the dispersion or risk that the PSC has not provided to the parties?
I'm just going to state an objection that by answering this question, there is no waiver on behalf of the commission as to its previously determined order. But with that stated,
yep, I'll stipulate to that, Mr. Powell.
Okay.
And Your Honor, for the record, we would also reserve our rights and want to make sure that disclosing the titles of the documents is not intended to be a waiver on behalf of SCS Carbon Transport either.
So stipulated.
All right, go ahead.
So with that, so I guess the titles, and they're lengthy, so I had to write them down for myself, but it's Dispersion Modeling Methodology is one of the documents. The other is Pipeline Risk Assessment Overview Report.
Okay. And again, I am not trying to circumvent. I don't want you to tell me anything about the contents of those documents. But is that, sir, to your understanding, the the sum and substance of any type of dispersion or plume modeling analysis or inputs of any kind that the commission has received from Summit that also have not been provided to the parties by the commission?
So I guess the way I would characterize it is the commission specifically asked Summit for dispersion modeling at one of the hearings last year. I forget which one or exactly which date. And these documents were what we received in response to that request.
Understood. And okay. And that includes that pipeline risk assessment document you referenced, correct?
Correct.
All right. I think that's all I have, sir. I just wanted to lay that foundation. I appreciate your willingness to answer those questions.
Mr. Dubinsky, any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Pelham?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Bakke?
No, Your Honor.
Commissioner Chrisman?
None.
Commissioner Hogan-Hoppert? Mr. Dawson?
None for me.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shook. All right. Any other matters we need to address before we conclude today? Commissioner Chrisman?
I just am clarifying. Mr. Jordy said he intended to call landowner Hagerat and maybe Rockstead on Monday. But did Mr. Bakke, what witnesses is he calling?
So we may call Bailey Elkins, but that's our witness who has some medical issues. So I just don't know how that's going to, and possibly work related. I'll try to find out as soon as I can, but I suppose, depending on the, I don't want to get into someone's personal information,
Sure.
but depending on her condition, I may not know till Monday.
But that's the only one.
That's the only one. Yeah.
And do we know who Summit is calling for
Rebuttal?
a rebuttal or anything like that?
Your Honor, consistent with the practice in the proceeding thus far, we can file that list tomorrow.
And Mr. Dubinsky, might want to have them available for the AM too, because
Absolutely. We will have them available all day on Monday.
At that point, okay. Any other matters to address?
Your Honor, well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for the remote option. It's worked extremely well, and it's saved the landowners a significant amount of money. Is it going to be possible to have this same arrangement for June 4th in Linton, or are you, Your Honor, in a position to give me guidance on that if you can?
We use, or not we, the commission uses another company that helps with, well, maybe I should defer because you guys might know more information than my last update, which was 2 days ago, I think.
Yeah, the same hearing room, same link and everything should be used by Dakota Sound in the Linton hearing. They're the ones who run our offsite hearings, but yeah, but they will have a GoToMeeting up, and that's in fact how we port it back here to broadcast it out. So it should be up and available.
This is Victor. I just want to reel that in just a smidgen, just because I have heard from Dakota Sound, they don't have certainty of an internet connection in that location. The last I spoke to them, they were trying to work that out, but I haven't received confirmation that they have a solid internet connection. So what they advised me is they should be able to get audio out of there, but they're not 100% sure about video, and they were still kind of working out those details.
So if anything, they might just do a phone call with them.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so worst case, remote participation is still going to be available on June 4th. It might be audio only, correct?
I would say that's fair.
Is that fair? Okay, very good. That helps with planning. And the reason I ask is, for instance, if over the weekend here, Miss Bailey isn't able to go, and then something happens with Mr. Hagerat, I'll send an email out, and then maybe I could have them call in to Linton, or I just want it to be a little flexible. So I appreciate that.
Well, Your Honor, I just want to say, I it's now starting to get concerned about the potential of, oh, well, we'll knock off early on Thursday. We probably won't do much of anything on Monday, and we'll jam everything into Tuesday so we can't possibly get done. And then the commission should start scheduling more hearing dates.
Yeah, that would be my concern too, because Emmons County filed their witness list, I believe, yesterday afternoon, and they have potentially 4 to 5 witnesses. So, and plus the commission made it clear that the Wapaton and the Linton hearings were primarily to hear from affected landowners in those areas and to take public testimony. So, like Commissioner Chrisman said, that day was not designed to be a catch-all for anything else that didn't fit elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if those comments are directed at me. I'm hopeful some won't delay in their rebuttal because they'll have the most the most lengthy witnesses. But like I said, John Hagerat scheduled for June 3rd. I'm simply saying, and apparently it's not the preference to do it on the 4th. So I'll try to continue to have him available on June 3rd, and maybe Mr. Rockstead. But those are my only 2 witnesses, regardless of when they fit in. I'm not bringing anybody else.
Do you mean for the Linton hearing? Are you having other witnesses for Linton?
No, so in Linton, we have one landowner that's in the Kurtzmans. So Mitch and Julia, they're Emmons County landowners, and so they were going to testify in Linton. But like my prior landowners, they should be pretty brief.
Mr. Bakke?
Yeah, and then June 3rd remote is still available, correct? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, because Ms. Elkins may decide that's the best option for her if she can testify.
And maybe it makes sense, Mr. Shook, once we get confirmation from Dakota Sound on Linton setup, maybe you could send an email to everybody and let us know.
Most of the time they don't go down until the evening before, so they may be speculating until they can get on site and get things hooked up. So we may not know until the morning of, or very late the evening before. So,
well, as helpful as that is, I wouldn't. Probably not video, probably audio.
Yep.
All right, any other matters? All right, we will recess for the rest of the day and reconvene Monday morning.